my earnings from Wimbledon, with my earnings in general. I invest in my future, so I save a lot of money.
While most of the tennis world was putting Wimbledon behind them, Aryna Sabalenka was doing exactly what many players do after a Grand Slam. She headed to Greece for a well-earned vacation, shared photos from the beach, and stepped away from the spotlight for a few days. But halfway across the world, another Wimbledon story was only beginning. It wasn't unfolding on center court. It wasn't happening at the All England Club. It was unfolding inside the presidential palace of the Philippines, and it involved a 21-year-old player who hadn't even reached the Wimbledon final. That raises an obvious question. How does a fourth-round run at Wimbledon end with an invitation from the president of an entire nation? The answer says just as much about Alex Eala's impact as it does about her tennis.
I just want to go, get completely drunk, forget about tennis, and try to get better in a better shape.
Only days after her Wimbledon campaign ended, Sabalenka openly admitted she wanted to switch off from tennis completely. "I just want to go get completely drunk," she told reporters, before taking time away to recharge ahead of the hardcourt season. At almost that exact moment, Alex Eala was walking through the gates of Malacañang Palace, where President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was waiting to present her with a presidential citation. Think about that contrast for a second. Same tournament, same week. Two of the biggest stories to come out of Wimbledon. Yet their journeys, after London, couldn't have looked more different. One chapter ended with a vacation. The other became a moment of national recognition. By the time Alex Eala arrived at the palace, her Wimbledon run was no longer being measured by where she finished in the draw. It was being measured by what it had come to represent for an entire country. And that transformation didn't happen because she won a title. It happened because of the extraordinary path she took to get there.
Marcos Jr., President of the Republic of the Philippines, presents this citation to Alexandra Eala.
Then came another update that looked ordinary at first glance. On the WTA's official player page, Alex Eala's career prize money quietly changed to $1,285,330. To most tennis fans, it was just another statistic, another number added to another player profile. But this wasn't just another financial milestone. It was the scoreboard of a journey that had taken years to build: every junior title, every challenger event, every qualifying match, every difficult decision to keep chasing a dream that many believed was still years away from becoming reality. Then, almost immediately, that number was overshadowed by something no amount of prize money could buy. 3 days after Wimbledon, on July 13, 2026, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. welcomed Alex Eala to Malacañang Palace, where she received a presidential citation with her parents, Mike and Riza Eala, standing proudly beside her. Think about how unusual that sequence is. 1 week, the governing body of women's tennis officially recognizes what you've earned on the court. The next, your own country recognizes what you've come to represent beyond it. Those two milestones arrived almost side by side. One belonged to professional tennis. The other belonged to history. And that's where this story became far bigger than Wimbledon. At the very same time, the tennis world was still talking about Aryna Sabalenka. Throughout much of the 2026 season, the world number one had repeatedly spoken about Grand Slam prize money, arguing that players deserved a larger share of the sport's biggest revenues. During Roland Garros, discussions about player compensation became one of the tournament's biggest off-court stories, and Sabalenka was frequently at the center of that conversation. Then Wimbledon came to an end. After her defeat, Sabalenka didn't hide her emotions. She admitted she wanted to forget about tennis for a while, recharge mentally, and prepare herself for the next chapter of the season, before later heading to Greece for a vacation. Meanwhile, Alex Eala's Wimbledon story still hadn't finished, because while one of the biggest names in tennis was stepping away from the spotlight, another was unexpectedly becoming its center. And if you really want to understand why the Philippines celebrated her the way it did, don't start with the palace. Start with $1,285,330. That figure isn't important because it crossed the $1 million mark. It's important because every single dollar represented victories that very few people believed a Filipina could achieve on the sport's biggest stages. The WTA wasn't making a prediction. It wasn't publishing a projection. It was recording what Alex Eala had already earned, officially, permanently. So where did those earnings come from? They came from one of the most remarkable Wimbledon campaigns ever produced by a Filipino tennis player. She opened the tournament with a composed straight sets victory over Renata Zarazua, immediately showing that she hadn't arrived simply to gain experience. The second round demanded something entirely different. Against Australia's Maya Joint, Eala lost the opening set and suddenly found herself on the edge of elimination. Many young players begin forcing shots when momentum slips away. Eala did the opposite. She slowed herself down, adjusted her patterns, trusted her game. The result was extraordinary. After dropping the first set, she completely flipped the match, dominating the final 2 sets and becoming the first Filipina in the Open era to win a Wimbledon main draw match. That achievement alone would have secured her place in Philippine tennis history. But she wasn't finished. Standing across the net in the 3rd round was defending Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek. For most players, that draw would have marked the end of a memorable tournament. For Alex Ayala, it became the performance that changed everything. She refused to be intimidated by one of the greatest competitors in the sport. Instead, she forced Swiatek to play a match on Ayala's terms. She varied the pace, changed the height of the ball, mixed slower serves with aggressive returns. Disrupted every rhythm the defending champion tried to establish. The first set ended in a tense tiebreak. Eala held her nerve. The second set became a statement. When match point was over, one of the biggest upsets of Wimbledon had been completed. And what happened afterward may have been even more revealing. Swiatek didn't blame bad luck. She didn't blame the conditions. She admitted she struggled with Ayala's slower serves and changing patterns. That's an important distinction. She wasn't saying she simply had an off day. She was acknowledging that Alex Ayala had outthought her, against one of the smartest players in women's tennis. That is praise very few opponents ever receive. That victory changed far more than the Wimbledon draw. It changed the way the tennis world looked at Alex Ayala. Within hours, international headlines were no longer asking whether she had a bright future. They were acknowledging that she had already arrived. Broadcasters praised her composure under pressure. Analysts highlighted the intelligence of her game. And fans who had never watched her before suddenly wanted to know everything about the young Filipina making history in London. But perhaps the biggest reaction came from home. Across the Philippines, millions followed every point, despite the late-night broadcast times. Families stayed awake together, restaurants organized watch parties, and Filipinos overseas refreshed live score updates during work breaks. What began as a tennis tournament had quietly become a national event. For years, people had described Alex Ayala as a prospect. A talented junior, a player whose biggest moments were still somewhere in the future. Wimbledon changed that conversation forever. The years of patience, sacrifice, and belief suddenly had proof, not predictions, proof. And that proof wasn't measured only in ranking points or prize money. It was measured by what happened next, on July 13. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. welcomed Alex Ayala to Malacanang Palace and presented her with a presidential citation, placing her achievement among the country's most celebrated sporting accomplishments. Even the title of the honor was widely fact-checked in the media because so many reports had incorrectly described it. A reminder of how closely the ceremony was being followed across the nation. The recognition wasn't simply about reaching the 4th round, it was about what that run represented. A young Filipina had walked onto one of tennis's most prestigious stages, defeated the defending Wimbledon champion, and shown millions of young athletes that the sport's biggest dreams were no longer out of reach. What's interesting is that this moment wasn't entirely unexpected to everyone on tour. Long before the palace ceremony, and long before Alex's career earnings crossed the $1 million mark, Aryna Sabalenka had publicly spoken about Ayala's work ethic, praising the dedication she showed on the practice court. The talent had always been there. Wimbledon simply gave the rest of the world undeniable evidence. Then came the moment that elevated the story beyond tennis, standing beside her parents in front of national television. President Marcos told Alex Ayala, "You never fail to remind everyone that you are a Filipina." He added, "What you did showed the whole world what a Filipino athlete is all about." Those words mattered because they transformed a Wimbledon campaign into something much larger than sport. Alex Ayala wasn't being recognized only as one of tennis's fastest rising stars. She was being celebrated as a symbol of national pride. And that's a distinction very few athletes ever achieve at just 21 years of age. With the North American hardcourt season approaching, attention naturally shifted toward what comes next. The possibility of future meetings with the world's best players, including Sabalenka, suddenly carried far more intrigue than it had only a few months earlier. Because after Wimbledon, Alex Ayala was no longer chasing recognition. She had already earned it. Now, the challenge was proving that this remarkable breakthrough was only the beginning of an even bigger story.